guys, it's Lily, and today I wanted to talk to you about project planning in my Hobonichi Cousin. So this was a video that was actually requested by a fellow academic planner addict, and I was really excited because I thought it would be nice to get the chance to talk about my academic projects in the hope that that would be useful for others who might be either PhD students or working on any kind of academic writing project, but also maybe that it might be useful for others who are working on other types of projects, whether writing or just kind of any type of project planning. Not that I have a really amazing elaborate system, but I just thought that it might be nice to share how I use my cousin for planning. So I'll show you a few different types of projects that I've worked on using my Hobonichi. They're all writing projects, and they kind of range. So I don't know if you can hear that in the background. That's my dog Panda. He's annoyed about something. I think the lack of a third dinner, maybe. So the first one is a kind of medium-sized project. It was about 20,000 words. Editing, completely rewriting a chapter of an atlas on world languages. It was the North Africa and Middle East section. And then a longer project that I'm working on now, which is a book, and then a couple of shorter projects, just to sort of give you, kind of a range of different types of things that, so that you can see different ways that I would approach different size projects. So the Atlas project, was basically there's this atlas and of world languages, and it was in need of a rewrite because the previous edition was quite old, and so I did the revised edition, which in the end turned out to be sort of, like I said, a complete rewrite. So it was totally different than the second edition. There was like nothing. So it was basically writing it effectively the same as writing a new chapter. So it's like writing a long article or a chapter. Like I said, it was about 24,000 words with the bibliography. So the first thing that I did was just to put in, let's see, I've got lots of things marked in here. So the very first thing that I did, this was like right when I first found out about the project, or like kind of first started thinking about working on it, was just some very, very basic notes about what I would do. Like, so I said, like, I'd read through the old edition, update the bibliography, update the content, reword anything as necessary, put in a section on ancient languages because there hadn't been one in the previous edition. And so this was like just a really, really basic kind of like first thoughts. And that's because hopefully I'm not alone in this, but the idea of starting a new writing project always terrifies me, no matter how many I've done. And I always feel like I won't be able to do it. So the first thing that I'd like to do is just to kind of put down something really basic that's easy and not at all threatening. And then I feel like I've got a framework to work with. So it's like, okay, I can read through the previous edition, and then I can update the bibliography, and then I'll worry about the rest of it later. So that's kind of how I approached it. So the first thing that I did was indeed to read through the old edition, and I decided that I wanted to change it completely. And then I started updating the bibliography, which is like kind of technical work. You have to make sure that you're getting a good range of references and the right kinds of references. But other than that, it's just really like kind of typing them up and putting them into a Word document, and afterwards, I always knew I can change them or add things or take some out if if it turns out that that I don't actually need them. So that was the first thing that I did. And then when I started working on the content, I put in some notes. Let's see, I have to kind of balance this because there are lots of names on the other notes pages. So I'm just kind of trying to get to the right one. So sorry about all the moving this the planner back and forth. Okay, so these are my first proper revision notes after I'd kind of decided what I wanted to do. I made a structure. So I was like, I'll have an introduction, and the introduction will cover which language families there are, you know, kind of in a list of the language families, when and where they're spoken. I know this is all really specific to a linguistic project, but just to give you an idea of like kind of what the actual content of my project is, but it doesn't matter, you know, obviously this could be applied to anything else in the humanities or I mean sciences. I'm less sure how it would work in the sciences, but hopefully the sort of general principles are the same. What the Afroasiatic languages have in common, because those are almost all the languages that are spoken in the region. And then just kind of like lists of some detailed things that I think should be included, and then like subsections. So like that's the introduction, and then the other sections would be on each of the different language families. And so this was like kind of taking that very, very initial basic list that I showed you before and making it a little bit more detailed. So I've got kind of like an outline of what I'd like the whole thing to look like, more or less, but still this is very general, and you know, it could change, but it's just kind of, it's like the next step. It's not too threatening to try to think of a structure, an outline. So that was the next thing that I did. And these are all, by the way, I'm using the daily note pages for this. So like I mentioned in my setup videos, if you've seen those, I use the daily pages in the Cousin for notes, not necessarily related to the date. So I probably didn't do this on the 11th of May. It was sometime earlier in the summer, but maybe it was like, I think it was like maybe late June or July. So I just use these as notes pages, and I use as many pages as I need for one thing. And sometimes I leave a page, you know, like only half written, because I write the topic at the top. So like this says Atlas of World Language Revision Notes. So I can always go back and check, like now when I was getting ready for this video, I went back and bookmarked all of the pages that had to do with this, and I could find them because they were labeled at the top. So that's all I do. I don't, you know, like kind of use the numbers for anything. So then the next thing that I did was to make some more notes. These are like kind of just things that occurred to me as I started working on it, like make section on ancient Semitic languages, introduce all the Semitic language. I was trying to think of like kind of ways how I could structure it, and these were just things that came to me when I wasn't working on it. So this project, like I think like probably almost all academics, I have a lot of different things going on at the same time. Not only academics, obviously, but I always have this vision of like just kind of devoting myself to a single project and working on it from start to finish, and you know, kind of really like getting into the swing of things and focusing on it. But that usually doesn't happen. This year is an exception. The next project that I'll talk about, I actually am doing that. I'm really lucky because I've got a year of research leave just to work on a single project. But normally, like working on this got interrupted by a million and one things. So like there was, you know, like summer courses and examiners meetings and like various other like kind of university admin type things, and other projects, another editing an editing project, and another writing project. So sometimes like a couple of weeks would go by and I didn't have time to work on this. So when something occurred to me, I would just write it down here so that next time I went to work on it, I could check, and then I would like tick off that I'd done all of these things. So then at some point when I really got into working on it properly, this is just another page of notes. This is like more things, because in the meantime lots of other stuff had happened, so there are all of these pages in the meantime. This is the thing about using this for notes, is that I just kind of use the paper as it comes. So it's like I don't know how many pages I will need for this atlas. So this is really just like kind of, it's not organized, and that's why I put the headings at the top, because if like 10 pages have gone by since the last time I made notes about the atlas, I'll just write a new page. I won't go back to the old page unless I can find it easily, and because I've got so much paper in here that I'm not worried about running out, so I think it's just easier to make a new page. So that was some more, yeah, kind of random notes. And then, okay, this is, so when I sort of really started getting into it, and again, I'm not sure how clearly you can see this, so I'll zoom in a bit. It's still kind of blurry, but I'll tell you what's on here anyway. So at some point I made a checklist of all of the different sections that I had to do. And the content was completely different from the original edition, but just to kind of like make sure that I didn't completely like sort of, I wanted the different sections to be sort of balanced. So I wrote down how many words there were in each of the original sections, and then how many words my section was, and like kind of how many words I had to work with. You know, because I wanted to make sure that it was kind of relatively even, and that I didn't like, you know, write 4,000 words on one topic and then like only have room for 200 words on another topic. I wanted them to be kind of, they weren't all the same length because some of them sort of by nature demanded a lot more space than others, but I just wanted to keep an eye on the word count. And so I made a checklist of all of the different topics, and then I used the stencils, the Hobonichi stencils, to put a little tick box next to each one. And I like the stencils because they fit perfectly, the little check boxes fit perfectly inside the Hobonichi grid. So you can just like make a row of ticks. So I wrote down like kind of bibliography, and then there was a section on Hebrew, a section on Northwest Semitic languages, Arabic, Old South Arabian, Modern South Arabian, Akkadian, Sumerian, Egyptian, etc. These weren't really in order. These were just kind of as I thought of them, but this was like everything that had to be included. And then how many there were 20 altogether. It actually turned out that I ended up grouping some of them together. So some of these were like subsections of other sections. And then I kind of worked out how many words I had and said, it's like, okay, it's if you calculated, it's like an average of 714 words per section, which obviously, like I said, they weren't all the same length, but just so that I knew, you know, kind of roughly what to aim for, so that I wouldn't feel like I had to write, you know, 3,000 words on one section. Because I think naturally with a project like this, as you start off, you're not really as sure of how it's going to take shape, and then the further you get, the more confident you get about like, yeah, that's enough, I've done that section, because I wanted them all to be kind of even. This, by the way, this atlas, it was like I was writing an overview of each of the languages spoken in the region. So, you know, like a historical introduction, where they're spoken, how many people speak them, what their basic sort of like characteristic features are, something about the literature, and then like kind of where to go for further bibliography on them. So this was like kind of a reference page that I kept coming back to, and then I would tick off each section as I did it. So then, as I was continuing, I sort of made some more, these are like random notes, but things that I had to check as I was working on the sections. So it's like, these are some bibliography items that I had to check. These, like all of these were sort of bibliography items that I had to remember to include. So this is just like kind of rough like work notes for as I was writing the chapter, and obviously I was writing it in Word, so these are just things that I felt like it would be helpful to have them on paper so that I could come back to them, and like, you know, make sure that I included them, because often in Word, like especially if you're jumping back and forth, if you have a long piece of writing, so this was like I don't know, maybe 50 pages or something, I can't remember, but you know, sort of going from the section that I was working on to the bibliography and back could be kind of frustrating. So sometimes I would just write down things here, and then I could refer to them at the same time as I was working. Or if I was reading something in the literature and it was kind of hard to keep track of it, it was much easier just to write it down here. So I had, you know, like kind of a list of all of these. These are all different languages, different Berber languages from North Africa. So I made that kind of note as I was going through it. Now, the other thing that I did, as I was actually working on it, was in the weekly pages, which is like my main schedule. That's where I kind of put all of my appointments, and like kind of, this is where my, you know, sort of like weekly planning, like what's going on during the week happens. So at this time, you can't really see very much here, and that's because I was working on like this week I was working on this day, sorry, I was working on Ethiopian Semitic languages. So that whole day was just devoted to that. And then I didn't finish it. So the next day I had like some more to do. And what I started doing here, which I found to be really helpful, and I've kind of elaborated on this later, so I'll show you a bit later with the next project, is I started putting in exact times when like, so here I said, okay, I have to finish the Ethiopian section between 4 and 6. And I find that quite helpful because often I feel like if you're working on a writing project and you're at home or in the library, I always work at home, but you're not, you don't have fixed hours. So it's like if you're like, okay, I have to write this section and you don't know how long it will take you, often to me, I start feeling a bit kind of lost and like maybe it will take me a week, maybe it will take me 2 weeks. I have no idea. So if I say like, okay, I want to write this section today and finish it tomorrow if I don't finish it today, even if that's a ridiculously short deadline and it turns out to be impossible, at least I've kind of like started off by giving myself a short deadline, and then I can say, okay, that wasn't realistic. Actually, it takes 3 days. And then I'll know that the same, that like the next section that I have to write, if it's a similar length and a similar type, I'll kind of know that I should probably allocate 3 days. So that sort of helps to plan how long the whole thing will take. In this case, I had a really tight deadline because my new research project was starting. This is mid-September. My new research project was starting on the 1st of October. So I only had like 2 weeks to finish this. I'd sort of been working on it in like um, sporadically over the summer, but I really only had like a concentrated maybe 3 weeks, I think, in September to, like work on it properly. So there was like kind of a time pressure. So I knew that I couldn't take 2 weeks to write one section, even though I wasn't really sure at the beginning how long each one would take. And so that's why I started like kind of mapping it out. And then I said, okay, and then at night, then I had a Russian class. And then when I get back from Russian, I'll do Old South Arabian and Modern South Arabian. And then I would put at the bottom of each day what I was expecting to do that day. So like here I wrote, so as it turned out, that was not realistic. I couldn't get that done. And then the next day I said, I'm going to do Old South Arabian and Modern South Arabian and maybe start on Arabic. And then as you can see, so I did that. I did Old South Arabian, Modern South Arabian, but I didn't start on Arabic. So I started on Arabic here. I also, at the same time, started off, this was even like kind of earlier, but before I really started working on this in depth, I'd kind of mapped out how many days I would have for this. So you see that says Atlas of World Languages 8, and then there's a 2 next to it, and that's because originally I thought that I would have more days to work on it. So I thought this would already be day 8 of working on it, and I did that like quite early on when I wanted to know how much time I'd have to devote to this, because I knew that the time was getting a bit pressured because other things that I'd had to do early in the summer had taken up a lot of time that I was initially hoping to be working on this, which often happens, right? So so I thought that this would be day 8, and I thought I would have like 21 days altogether, and that made me feel a bit calmer because it's like, okay, I have like 3 full weeks of work on this. And then it turned out that actually it was only day 2. And then this one that said day 9 turned out to be day 3, and then that was day 4. So I just kind of like rewrote them so that I would know how many days I'd spent on it. And then let's see, the next week, it's kind of similar, but you can see here I've blocked off these times. So I said this at this point I was working on Aramaic, and in between I was doing other things. So there's some days where there was nothing Atlas related because I couldn't work on the Atlas. So here I've said I've given myself from 1 till 3 to finish the Aramaic section, and then I've given myself from 3 until 8 to do Hebrew and Northwest Semitic. And I finished Hebrew. No, I didn't finish Hebrew because here the next day it says finish Hebrew at the top. So I use these check boxes to put in like my main kind of things that I'm going to be doing for the day. And then here is like where I sort of break it down by time. So I finished Hebrew, but that was like a small thing. And then I dedicated, I don't remember what was going on here. I don't know why there's nothing marked off there. Maybe that was the amount of time it took me to finish Hebrew, but I didn't schedule it. And then I gave myself from 2 until 6 to do Northwest Semitic. But I didn't finish that because then here I've got Northwest Semitic, and then I did Akkadian, and then sometimes I would put in all of this other stuff that I was planning to do, like Sumerian, and then I had to bump it. So I put an arrow to the right, going to the right, if I've had to bump something to another day, and then I'll write it in at the same time on the next day so that I don't lose it. So like when I realized that all this time was dedicated to Akkadian, then I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to do Sumerian today. I'll rewrite it for, what did I write it for? Let's see. Here, because I think I didn't get to work on it that previous week. So it ended up being, this was where I did the Proto-Semitic section, and then this was Sumerian. So I was like just blocking off these units of time within the day, and that was quite helpful. And then this was Egyptian and Coptic, and then I was like kind of already getting close to the end. So just at the very end of that project, let's see, there are only a couple more things to do with that. So I had a few things here. These were just notes of some books that I had to get from the library, like just references that I had to check. And then some other like kind of random notes as I was getting close to the end. And then this is the other thing that's useful. So as I was working on it, sometimes I had an idea of something to include for a particular section when I was away from the laptop. So like if I was out like traveling on the underground or doing something else. And so I would note down like, this is how I want this was the Arabic chapter. So this is how I want the Arabic chapter to be structured, and the intro, classification, history, script, grammar, dialects. And then I also had an idea, I think this was at night after I'd stopped working, but I was still thinking about it. So before I went to sleep, because I like have this with me all the time, I wrote down this kind of draft paragraph of what I wanted to include on the like Hebrew grammar section, and then I just typed it up when I went the next time I went to work on the atlas. And I have some more notes like this here. So this was for Sumerian and this is for Egyptian, just like kind of an outline of that particular chapter. And this was Proto-Semitic. So this was like what I want to include. I didn't do these for every one of them, but this was kind of as it was getting towards the end and I had more of an idea of what the structure of each chapter, of each section looked like. I just wrote these down so that I would feel like I had something to work with when I went to start working on that section. And then finally, I just have some, like these are some more kind of random notes because these at the same time, you know, I kept having other things that I had to check, bibliography, and this was like kind of some notes from secondary literature that I was reading as I was working on this section about Egyptian. So that kind of stuff kept going all the way through. And then finally, at the end, when I was like kind of getting close to submitting, I had some notes on like population statistics for some of these endangered languages from the region that I just wrote down here as I was sort of working them out. And then like a couple of things that I had to add before I submitted it, a reference and some other things. And that was it for that project. So that's kind of what that looked like in my planner. So it's a bit of a mess, but at the same time, like I found it sort of really useful being able to record all of these different things, you know, from the initial notes to the sort of breakdown of the structure to like kind of individual chapter sections to like kind of just rough notes. So that was that project. Now, the next one that I'll show you is the current project that I'm working on, and that's a sort of much bigger project. It's a book. So it's an edition of some Hebrew translated plays. And so I've had an idea, because this is a project and it's this kind of dedicated research project. I've had an idea for a while because, you know, I've written proposals for it. So I have some idea of what the structure will be, but I've copied down, just show you what I've done in here so far. So the first thing that I did was to copy down the proposed timeline. And this comes from my proposal for a grant for this project. So I've just written down the year one timeline because it's actually a sort of an 18-month project, but the writing part is in the first year, and then the second year is going to be some other activities like organizing a conference and putting on a play, which will be fun. But the writing part is all that I have to sort of deal with now. And also I thought there's no point writing down year 2 here because this cousin will be finished by then, and I'll be in a new cousin. So I won't worry about that until then. So I've just written down the timeline of like what I have to do. And this is, so like kind of the first thing to do is retype the plays and the source text, and then do a back translation. So I'm doing a translation from the Hebrew into English. They were originally written in English. It's Shakespeare. And then write a commentary, and then like kind of write the sort of the there's some other things that I have to do to do with the conference in the meantime, but then like kind of write the introduction and sort of all the parts of that, and then finally kind of edit the volume. So that's just like a basic timeline. But again, at the beginning of the project, it kind of helped me to feel like, okay, I know where to start, because I think that's one of the most overwhelming things about writing projects, or any project really, I guess, is feeling like it's too big and like you're not going to be able to do it all. So it's just psychologically really helpful to break it down into small manageable chunks and start with something, you know, like that seems easy, and then that sort of gives me the confidence to go on and do more. So that's the timeline. Then the only other thing that I have in the notes pages at the moment is sort of like a layout of the book, and that has sort of like, it's changed from the initial proposal. So this was just a reworking that I did, in fact, a couple of days ago. As you can see, this is the most recent thing in the notes pages here. So you can see the dates really have nothing to do with it, because I'm on the end of July in the notes pages, but it's now the end of October. So that's why I've got tons of extra paper, which is a nice thing. I think using it like this, you really don't have to worry about running out of paper. So you've got a good supply of notes for the year. So I've just done a sketch of like, this is going to be the introduction, and then there's like going to be, and then this is kind of like the rest of the book, and this is how many words it is. So I kind of know more or less what the structure will be. And then the other thing that I'm doing with this project is, okay, so you can see that there are lots of, I don't know how closely you can see this, but it's basically just, it's divided by the hour and their page numbers. And that's because at the moment, like I mentioned, I'm typing out the play, the Hebrew plays, because I'm working on, these are 19th century plays, and so they, I've got like kind of the original 19th century edition, and I'm typing them out because they need to be transferred into, you know, digital electronic format, so that I can then sort of work with them. So I kind of worked out that I have like sort of 3 weeks altogether in my schedule to do the typing. And I thought that was a nice thing to start with, because it's, again, it's very manageable, it's technical. It seemed like an easy entry because, you know, all I have to do is type. So it's kind of repetitive, but I can listen to YouTube videos, planning videos while I'm doing it, so it's great. So I worked out, in order to keep on schedule, because again, it's the sort of thing that's like, well, I know you can only type as fast as you can type, but, you know, if you sort of are kind of like meandering and you don't really know how much you have to do in a day, for me at least, I feel like it could easily kind of stretch out, you know, like I have no idea how long it could take, because I might say like, well, I did like 10 pages today, or I did, you know, like, so I wanted to kind of know how much I should expect to do. So I set these targets. And then if I can't meet the targets, then I'm like, all right, I'll revise them slightly. And that happened a couple of times, not with typing the consonants, but with typing the vowels, which is a Hebrew issue. So I worked out like, this is how much I have to do per hour. So it's like I have to do 9 pages per hour. And then I calculated that like that was how many, so it's like I had, on this day I had to get from page 165 to 198, and then I divided, like, say if I have 9 hours to do it in, or this time my plan was to go from 10 until 9. I'm not sure if I actually did that, but it was something like that. Maybe it was 11 until 9, because I often get up later than I want to. And so I just worked out like, this is how I have to do per hour, and then this is where I have a break, and then I would just like mark off when I'd done them, and if I got behind, then I would revise it. So this is what I did every day last week, and the same thing. So that was the week before, and then you can see this week. This is today's Sunday, so this is the week that's just gone. It was the same thing. I did, yeah, worked out every day how much I had to do in that day, in order to be able to finish by the end of next week. So by next Sunday, that's my sort of plan. So it's just like, and at the top of the page, I wrote vowels, Act 3, vowels, Act 4 vowels. I divided it up by act. So yeah, this is just like per hour. So obviously it's harder to do this kind of very detailed, timed schedule with something a bit more amorphous like actual writing. I think I wouldn't be able to do that, because sometimes writing a paragraph can take a long time, and sometimes you can, like you write like, I don't know, 3 pages relatively quickly. It just depends on how it flows. So I don't think I'd be able to do this for the actual writing, but for something mechanical like this, it helped me to keep on schedule by having this like kind of very strict schedule and having to like say like I'm doing this much per hour. So this is another reason why I love the weeks, because sorry, I love the weeks too. Here it is. This is my Hobonichi weeks, but I love the Cousin weekly spread because it gives you this ability to have very precise times. It's broken down by the half hour, so you can really kind of schedule things out precisely. The other thing about this project is that I've made, because it's a sort of longer term project, I've sort of set up a dedicated notebook for it, which I thought would be a good idea because it goes on, like I said, it goes on for 1.5 years, so it will sort of last beyond the life of this Hobonichi. And rather than having things like spread between 2 Hobonichis, which I will to an extent anyway, but I thought that it would be nice to have everything to do with this book project in here. The book project and the related activities. So at the moment it doesn't have a huge amount in it, but it's got a picture of Shakespeare. It's Shakespeare plays, Hebrew translations of Shakespeare plays. And so this is a Leuchtturm A5 gridded notebook because I love gridded paper. And I've got it inside, this is a cake dory, fabric faux dory cover. So I just like kind of put the date at the top here. Not that it really matters that much, but it's just kind of because the Leuchtturm notebooks give you a space to write the date, so it kind of feels like I should fill in the date. So this is like an original sort of early plan for the book. This was a comment that I got at a conference that I thought was important to remember. This is an outline for an article, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. These were some notes on the conference, that just things that, anything that I think of about this project, I'll put in here. And then I know that if I look through this and check everything, that I won't miss anything. So I've got notes in here as well, but the thing that I showed you, the layout for the book that I showed you in here a while ago, I put that in here too. So I wrote it in here because I keep this, this is like in a drawer, so because I don't use it all the time, whereas I always have this with me. So I wrote down something in here, that layout, and then I copied it into this so that it would be in here as well. And that way I just know that everything to do with the project is in here, just because it's a big project. I wouldn't do that with a smaller thing. So that's that project. And then I'll just show you a couple of smaller ones. So this was a book review that I did for a journal, and it was like quite small. It was only 1,000 words. So I just wrote like kind of an initial outline of what I thought it should include. And it's really like, this was, again, I sort of just jotted down, I think that it should include like this and this and this and this, and like some initial thoughts. And then the first thing that I did when I went to write the review was to sort of copy this down. And then that instantly made me feel like I'd begun. And writing this out was very non-threatening, because it's like I'm just writing down some initial thoughts. And so then I kind of edited it and polished it, and kind of that turned out to be a lot of the review was just because it was short, was from this initial sort of like jotting down session. So for a small project, like that was kind of all I needed to get started. And then the last thing that I'll show you is an article. So it's this article that I mentioned. So I'm writing an article which is related. It's about an aspect of this Shakespeare project. And I sort of put the outline in here. So this is just like, it's the same thing that I showed you for the atlas. This is just a kind of an idea of like, this is what the introduction will be. This is what I'll do then. This is kind of like the basic structure of the article. I put that in here. And then I'm going to start working on it next week after I finish typing all of the typing that I showed you. I've got one more week to do that, and then I'm going to do this article. And the article is based on a conference presentation, so I know, you know, sort of what it's about more or less, and I've got that structure here. So what I've done here is just sort of like broken it down very basically by day. So I'm going to start on November 9th, Monday. So I said that day I'll put in the examples, like the data, and then start analyzing the examples. And that seems quite non-threatening, just to kind of break it down like that. Then the next day I'll carry on with the analysis and start with the introduction. Then the day after that is finishing the introduction and starting to like kind of edit and polish. And then the day after that is like polishing and submitting. And so I've kind of budgeted 4 days for that, which I think is manageable based on other similar things that I've done previously. And, you know, because I've got sort of a lot of the raw data and I have an idea of what I want to include. But this is sort of how I would initially break it down in the weekly section, so that I know like I'm allocating these days to it. And if it goes over and I have to spend another day on it, like it's fine, I'll just bump this. Or if I finish it sort of, you know, more quickly, then I'll go back to doing what I was doing before, which, well, the next part of the book project, which is translating the plays. And so when I get to this actual week, like sort of the night before the first day, like maybe I'll allocate hours. So I'll say like, you know, like, I don't know, from 10 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon, I'll do the examples. And then for the rest of the afternoon, then I'll have a break. And then for the afternoon and early evening, I'll start doing the analysis. So I would probably like say, let's say 10 until 1 examples. And then I'll say from 2 until 7 analysis. And because I know what I'm doing here more or less, like I don't need to put in any more detail, but probably during the day I'll make some kind of extra smaller divisions here if that seems useful. So yeah, that's how I use my cousin for planning writing projects. I hope that this was helpful, whether or not you're working on a writing project or some other kind of project. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye.